I recently started a new job and was quickly promoted to a management position. With my long history in supervisory roles, I'm excited about contributing on a larger scale. One of my direct reports, Scott, is a young, ambitious, and conscientious employee, and I've enjoyed working with him so far. Last week, during a routine project discussion, Scott mentioned he had run a background check on me. He brought up an arrest on my record, a misunderstanding involving an insurance lapse that led to a suspended license, culminating in a brief stint in jail after a traffic stop. It was a humiliating but eye-opening experience. This incident isn't something easily found online. After Scott's comment, I checked myself and suspect he accessed a paid background check service to get the details. He framed his inquiry as doing some research and asked me to clarify whether the arrest occurred in one state or another. His knowledge of these details indicated he went beyond publicly accessible information. Caught off guard, I answered truthfully, explained it was a decade-old issue caused by specific circumstances, and then excused myself to process the interaction. But the more I think about it, the more uncomfortable I feel. It seems like a significant overstep, and I'm struggling to decide how to address it effectively without alienating him or creating unnecessary tension. To be fair, the office culture here is pretty aggressive, and coworkers routinely ask for detailed professional histories. But while I understand company-mandated background checks during hiring, I draw the line at employees delving into personal matters. This wasn't a deep, dark secret. I'm more bothered by the fact that he obtained and raised this information at all. How can I best handle this follow-up conversation and move past my unease? Scott is eager to advance, and I feel it's crucial to address this boundary issue constructively. The situation strikes me as highly inappropriate. Running a paid background check on one's manager is an enormous boundary violation. Even more troubling is that Scott openly acknowledged doing this and proceeded to ask clarifying questions, as though his behavior was entirely normal. His phrasing, "doing some research and wanted to clarify," shows a concerning lack of awareness about professional boundaries. This isn't something relevant to his role or appropriate for him to research in the first place. Have you noticed other signs of poor judgment from him? This kind of behavior could indicate deeper issues, whether it's naivety or something more troubling. Your discomfort is valid and justified. I'd suggest addressing it directly. Here's how you might frame it. Scott, I was surprised by your question last week about a traffic incident from my past. I didn't address it fully in the moment because I was taken aback, but I want to understand why you decided to conduct that kind of background search on me and what led you to bring it up. This felt like a boundary violation, and while I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, I want to be clear that this was inappropriate. Moving forward, it's important to respect people's privacy. This is not something that should happen again with anyone here. Then, monitor his judgment closely in other situations. This may be a one-off lapse, but it's worth being vigilant about any other signs of overstepping boundaries. Imagine my surprise when I saw that my original letter had been reshared on your blog. I felt it was only fair to provide an update to the community. Your advice on handling such an unusual situation was invaluable. It reminded me of what normal workplace boundaries should look like, and I deeply appreciated that perspective. While I didn't participate in the original discussion, I read every comment with great interest. Your point about questionable judgment was spot on. Scott, as I mentioned before, was a younger employee brimming with confidence in his intellect and a strong belief in his own abilities. He had detailed 5-, 10-, and 15-year plans filled with ambitious goals but lacked the basic sense to navigate interpersonal situations appropriately. His prior work experience in an unrelated field left him convinced it was perfectly acceptable to scrutinize those around him and then verify his observations through additional research. Scott was actively pursuing promotions within the company, despite lacking the necessary experience or skills. Meanwhile, I had been hired into a line-level position and quickly promoted to management. In our field, career advancement often requires moving to different locations, which meant I had spent years relocating frequently, seizing opportunities, and working long hours. While my resume included accolades from some high-profile assignments, anyone who's done the work knows the glamour is largely superficial. Scott's interest in my career trajectory, paired with his flawed understanding of professional boundaries, culminated in the situation I initially described. When I planned to address the matter with him, he preempted me by asking about the arrest again, this time with my booking photo pulled up on his computer screen. I immediately told him to close it and brought him into a private meeting. Using much of the phrasing from your advice, I explained how his behavior crossed professional boundaries and violated my privacy. Scott seemed genuinely confused, believing it was entirely reasonable to dig for detailed information about colleagues. His justification for bringing it up? He claimed he was alerting me that this information was out there. I made it clear that his actions were unacceptable, displayed poor judgment, and were especially inappropriate given our manager-employee relationship. I also informed him that both conversations would be documented, and he'd receive a formal write-up, as his behavior jeopardized his future with the company. In hindsight, I truly believe Scott was an intelligent individual who proved that even smart people can act foolishly. Did I document everything thoroughly? Absolutely. Did I consult HR and my manager? Of course. My boss was ready to terminate him immediately, and HR was both shocked and extremely supportive in addressing the situation. Ultimately, Scott was placed on final warning. Did Scott get promoted? Not while I was there. To his credit, Scott showed a genuine effort to improve after the incident, and we ended on decent terms. I even suggested he read Ask a Manager regularly as part of his professional growth. The pandemic, however, completely upended my industry. By March 2020, most of my colleagues were either unemployed or stretched thin working with reduced teams. I took a hard look at what I wanted in a career, picked up Allison's book How to Get a Job, revamped my resume, and started searching. I've since transitioned to a new industry with a wonderful company that offers better work-life balance and a healthier workplace culture. While I sometimes miss my old career, I'm much happier and more settled now. As for Scott, I have no idea where he ended up, and I won't be Googling him. Story 2. I, 27M, found out my girlfriend, 26F, had been venting about me in a group chat, but there's more to it. So, this is a lot to unpack, and I really need some perspective here. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I have been together for about 3 years. Things have been mostly great, she's funny, smart, and we share a lot of the same interests. But recently, I've noticed she's been acting kind of distant. She'd hide her phone more, and when I'd ask her what was wrong, she'd just say she was tired or stressed from work. Last week, she left her phone on the couch while she went to shower. A notification popped up from her group chat with her friends, and I didn't mean to snoop, but the preview caught my eye. It said something like, "Yeah, he does that all the time, and it's honestly so exhausting." I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And what I found really hurt me. She'd been complaining about me in this group chat for months. Everything from how I don't try hard enough in our relationship to mocking little quirks of mine that I thought she loved. What stung the most was when she mentioned how she sometimes wonders if she settled. Her friends were piling on, saying I wasn't good enough for her, and one even suggested she break up with me to find someone who matches her energy. It was brutal to read. But here's the kicker, one of the friends in the group chat, let's call him Jake, was overly supportive of her complaints. I mean, like, way too supportive. He was always agreeing with her, calling me bare minimum, and suggesting how any guy would be lucky to have her. It felt like he was trying to wedge his way in. After reading this, I felt completely gutted. I confronted Sarah that same night and told her what I saw. She was furious that I went through her messages but didn't deny what I found. She said that sometimes she vents because she doesn't feel heard in our relationship and that it's normal to talk to her friends about things like this. When I brought up Jake, she got defensive and said they're just friends, and he's like that with everyone. I don't know what to do. On one hand, I understand that people need to vent sometimes, but on the other, this felt cruel and unfair. Especially the part about wondering if she settled. Am I overreacting? Is venting like this really normal? And should I be worried about Jake, or am I just spiraling? Edit/update. Thanks for all the responses, everyone. A lot of you pointed out that the issue isn't just the venting, it's how she did it and how she let her friends openly disrespect me. I sat Sarah down again, and we had a much deeper conversation. She admitted she's been unhappy with certain parts of our relationship but never communicated them to me directly because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. She did apologize for the harsh things she said and how her friends treated me, but she also said she doesn't see a problem with Jake being supportive. She insists it's platonic, but I told her it made me uncomfortable. At this point, I'm considering taking a break. I love her, but I feel like the trust is cracked, and I don't know if we can repair it. If anything else happens, I'll update. Thanks again for the advice. Story 3, my 29F sister, 33F, is furious because I won't let her live in my house with her kids. I never thought I'd be airing my family drama on Reddit, but here I am. I need some outside perspective because I'm being called heartless, and I'm not sure if I'm wrong. For context, I, 29F, bought my first home a year ago. It's a small, 2-bedroom house, nothing fancy, but it's mine, and I worked really hard to save up for it. I've been super proud of this milestone because I didn't grow up with much, and this felt like a huge accomplishment. Enter my sister, Karen, not her real name, but fitting. She's 33, a single mom of 2 kids, 5M and 7F, and has been struggling financially. She works part-time, but her ex doesn't consistently pay child support, and she's been behind on rent for months. Last week, she told me her landlord is kicking her out at the end of the month, and she asked if she and her kids could move in with me for a little while. I immediately felt torn. I love my sister and my niece and nephew, and I don't want them to be homeless. But at the same time, my house is tiny, and I have a routine that I'm very protective of. I work from home, and my second bedroom is set up as an office. There's no real extra space for 3 more people, especially 2 small kids. I told her I'd think about it, but the more I considered it, the more it felt impossible. I'd be losing my workspace, dealing with the noise and chaos of kids, and completely changing my life to accommodate them. Not to mention, Karen and I don't have the best track record of living together. We tried as roommates years ago, and it ended with us barely speaking for months because she never contributed to bills or cleaning. So, I told her no. I offered to help her look for other options, like a short-term rental or resources for single moms, and even said I'd lend her some money for a deposit. But she completely flipped out. She accused me of being selfish and caring more about my precious house than my own family. She said I'd understand if I had kids of my own and that I was leaving her with no options. Now my mom is involved, and she's taking Karen's side, saying I'm being too harsh and that family is supposed to help each other. My mom even suggested I move back in with her for a while so Karen and the kids can use my house. I shut that down immediately, but now everyone's treating me like the villain. The guilt is eating at me. I don't want Karen to suffer, but I also don't feel like I should have to uproot my life for a situation I didn't cause. Am I wrong here? Should I just suck it up and let them stay? I don't know what to do anymore. After a few days of tension-filled phone calls and text exchanges, Karen decided to escalate things. She posted a long, passive-aggressive Facebook status about how some people prioritize their material possessions over family and how it's sad when your own sister won't lift a finger to help her struggling family. Of course, she didn't name me directly, but it was obvious to everyone who knew the situation. Now I've got extended family chiming in. My aunt texted me to say, "It's just temporary, sweetie, you'll barely notice they're there." And my cousin sent me a meme about being a selfish sibling, I'm guessing as a joke, but it still stung. My mom even called me crying, saying Karen's stress is making her physically ill, and she begged me to reconsider, for the kids. The thing is, this guilt trip is almost working. I've been questioning myself constantly. Am I really being selfish? Am I putting my comfort over my family's basic needs? I talked to a couple of close friends about it, and while they're supportive, even they suggested I might feel less guilty if I just let them stay for a month or 2. But here's the kicker, I know Karen. Karen has a history of turning temporary help into permanent arrangements. Back when she first split with her ex, she stayed with our mom for a few weeks that turned into over a year. She never contributed to groceries or bills, and mom had to push her constantly to even clean up after the kids. I'm worried if I let her move in, I'll never get her out without creating an even bigger family feud. I tried talking to Karen again, offering to help in other ways. I even suggested splitting the cost of a cheap extended stay motel while she finds a more permanent solution. She dismissed the idea, saying she doesn't want her kids living in some gross motel. Then she went right back to accusing me of abandoning her. The final straw for me happened yesterday. I got a call from my mom, and when I answered, I could hear Karen in the background, yelling about how this is why no one will ever want to marry me, because I'm cold and selfish. That hit a nerve. My own sister, someone I'm trying to help in other ways, tearing me down like that? I hung up on my mom, something I've never done before, and spent the rest of the day fuming. This morning, I woke up to an email. It was a GoFundMe link that Karen set up, asking for help to keep her family off the streets. The description was filled with exaggerated claims about her situation, and while she didn't name me, she mentioned that her sister refused to let her stay in her house. Some of my extended family had already donated, and now the guilt is stronger than ever. I feel like I'm trapped. If I stand my ground, I'm the heartless sister who didn't care about her niece and nephew. If I let them move in, I'll lose my space, my routine, and my sanity, and I'll probably end up in a bigger mess when it's time for them to leave. Update. First, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Reading your advice really helped me see things more clearly and reminded me that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. A lot has happened since I posted, so here's where things stand now. After the GoFundMe stunt, I decided I needed to address this head-on before things spiraled even further. I called Karen and told her we needed to talk. She was still angry and defensive, but I stayed calm and explained my side. I told her that I love her and her kids, but letting them move in wasn't something I could handle emotionally, physically, or financially. I reiterated my offers to help in other ways, like paying for a short-term rental or even putting more money into her GoFundMe to boost her total. She wasn't having it. She accused me of being all talk and not actually wanting to help. She even said something along the lines of, "If you really cared, you'd sacrifice like a real sister would." That hurt, but I stayed firm. I told her I wouldn't let her guilt me into a decision I wasn't comfortable with and that I hoped we could move forward without ruining our relationship. Then, my mom called again. She was furious. Apparently, Karen had been venting to her nonstop, and my mom was fully on her side. Mom said she was ashamed of me for abandoning my family and letting my sister sink. I told her that Karen had other options and that I wasn't refusing to help, I was just setting boundaries. When Mom started shouting, I calmly said I wouldn't continue the conversation if she couldn't respect my decision, and I hung up. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done. After that, I felt emotionally drained. I took a few days to focus on myself and think about what to do next. I decided to double down on my offer to help Karen in other ways. I contacted her directly, via text, to avoid another blow-up, and told her I'd found a few rental options in her area that I was willing to help cover for the first 2 months. I even offered to babysit the kids while she worked or looked for a better job. I wanted to show her that I wasn't abandoning her, I just couldn't give up my house. Her response? Silence. She didn't reply for days, but I noticed she updated the GoFundMe to say, "Thanks for the support, everyone. Looks like we might have a solution soon." It seemed like she'd managed to raise enough money to cover a deposit on a new place. Then, the bombshell, my aunt called me last night to tell me Karen had actually been crashing at her house this whole time. Apparently, Karen had asked to stay just for a week until she figured things out, but she hadn't mentioned it to anyone else. My aunt said she was fine with Karen being there temporarily but felt blindsided because Karen had been making it sound like she was completely homeless with no options. My aunt wanted to know if Karen had asked me for help and why I'd refused. I told her everything. Now, I'm left feeling, I don't know. Relieved? Vindicated? A little betrayed? Karen made it seem like I was her only option, but she clearly had other places to turn. It feels like she was trying to manipulate me, and that really stings. My aunt says Karen is looking for a new place now, so it sounds like she's finally taking steps to fix her situation. But our relationship feels broken. I haven't heard from Karen or my mom since all this came to light. I don't know if this is the end of the drama or just the calm before the next storm, but for now, I'm focusing on setting stronger boundaries and taking care of myself. I hope Karen gets back on her feet, but I also hope she understands that what she did, lying, guilt-tripping, and involving the entire family, wasn't fair. Update 2, hey again, Reddit. I honestly didn't think there would be much left to update, but the drama has somehow taken a turn I didn't expect. Buckle up, because this might be even messier than the first 2 rounds. After my last update, I thought things were settling down. Karen hadn't contacted me, and I figured she was too busy dealing with her own situation. But then my mom called me out of the blue last weekend, and I could tell immediately that she was trying to keep her tone light, fake cheerful, you know? She started by casually asking how I was doing and if I'd reconsidered helping Karen now that things were clearer. I asked her what she meant by clearer, and that's when she dropped the bombshell. Karen wasn't actually looking for a new place. Apparently, she had told my mom she was planning to stay at my aunt's house indefinitely because families should take care of each other, and my aunt was less uptight than I was. My mom fully supported this plan, saying that Karen and the kids just needed stability for a while, and since my aunt was being generous, I should at least offer to pitch in financially to ease the burden. This rubbed me the wrong way for so many reasons. First, Karen wasn't even looking for a real solution, she was just shifting the problem to someone else. Second, my mom was once again trying to guilt me into taking responsibility for a situation I had nothing to do with. And third, I knew my aunt wouldn't stand for this long term, so it felt like Karen was just kicking the can down the road. I told my mom I wasn't getting involved. I had already offered to help Karen multiple times in ways that didn't involve moving her into my home, and she'd rejected those offers. I said if Karen was staying with my aunt, that was between them, and I wasn't going to send money just to make everyone feel better about it. My mom got defensive and accused me of being selfish as usual. I calmly reminded her that Karen was a grown adult and needed to take responsibility for her choices. Then I hung up. But it didn't end there. 2 days after that conversation, I got a call from my aunt. She sounded absolutely livid. She told me Karen had completely overstayed her welcome and wasn't contributing anything, not to groceries, not to utilities, not even cleaning up after her kids. My aunt, who's in her 60s and lives alone, said she felt like her home had been invaded. She'd tried to talk to Karen about setting a timeline for when she'd move out, but Karen dismissed her, saying things like, "Don't worry, we won't be here forever and I just need a little more time." What's worse, my aunt revealed that Karen had been badmouthing me to her face. Apparently, Karen was telling my aunt that I forced her into this situation by refusing to help and that I was turning the family against her. My aunt said she didn't believe Karen but felt stuck because of the kids. At this point, I was beyond frustrated. I told my aunt I'd support her if she wanted to set boundaries with Karen, even if it meant kicking her out. My aunt admitted she was afraid of looking like the bad guy to the rest of the family but agreed that Karen needed to leave sooner rather than later. I encouraged her to be honest and stand her ground, and she thanked me for listening. The next day, I got a group text from Karen, yes, a group text, including me, my mom, my aunt, and a few cousins. She wrote a long, dramatic message about how she felt betrayed by her family and how everyone was turning their backs on her when she needed them most. She said she couldn't believe she had to fight for basic compassion and that it was clear no one cared about her kids' well-being. She ended the message by saying she was done relying on selfish people and would figure things out on her own. I didn't respond immediately, but my aunt did. She replied, "Karen, I love you, but this is unfair. I opened my home to you and your kids, and you've taken advantage of that kindness. You're not looking for solutions, you're expecting everyone else to fix your problems. I've given you a deadline of 2 weeks to find somewhere else to go, and I suggest you start taking that seriously." My jaw dropped when I saw that message. My aunt is usually the most soft-spoken, go-along-to-get-along type, so for her to lay it out like that was shocking. The group chat exploded after that. My mom chimed in, accusing my aunt of being heartless, while Karen played the victim, saying she couldn't believe her own family would throw her out. I stayed quiet for most of it, but when Karen started blaming me again, I finally spoke up. I said, "Karen, I've offered to help you multiple times, but you've rejected every solution that doesn't involve you taking over someone else's space. At some point, you need to take responsibility for your own life. It's not fair to guilt everyone else into fixing your problems." The chat went silent after that. No one responded for hours, and then Karen left the group entirely. It's been a week since that blow-up. Karen is still staying with my aunt for now, but my aunt told me she's sticking to her 2-week deadline. My mom is furious with me and my aunt, but I've decided to stop engaging. I'm emotionally exhausted, and I've realized that no matter what I do, some people in my family will always see me as the villain for not sacrificing everything. As for Karen, I don't know what her plan is, or if she even has one. I'm sad that it's come to this because I really do care about her and her kids, but I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep her warm. I've done what I can, and now it's up to her to figure out her next steps. Thanks again for all the advice and support, Reddit. If anything else happens, I'll let you know, but for now, I'm focusing on protecting my peace.